everybody, to episode 80. Episode 80 is a special one to Everything Teams Phone Live. We are here today. This is episode 5 for Mr. Matt Carlson joining us to go through a massive migration process. He's given us tools, he's given us tips and tricks. We're excited. We're heading into the holiday season. We're post, one holiday, ready for the next. It's a busy time of year. Brandon, Bailey, Matt, how are you guys today?
Doing well.
Good.
It's my weather is about as dreary as yours. Little snowflakes falling. I guess the winter season is upon us. Yeah, but all is good.
All's good. For those of you who know me, I kind of split the time between Scottsdale and Sammamish, Washington, which is outside of Seattle. I'm begrudgingly in Seattle at the Northwest right now, and it is like when you come from 77 degrees and sunny, holler sort of Arizona and Scottsdale, it's amazing. And then you pop into the Northwest, you're like, oh, it's kind of cold up here. It's like, and it's a bit wet. I mean, it's beautiful if you like this sort of thing, So, don't know where I was going with that, but man,
well, some
it's
people
no good.
Do. Some people love our counterparts in Netherlands and in the Amsterdam area. Our Horizon counterpart. They probably love the cloudy because they actually have a whole joke about how dreary and like they have a joke when the sun comes out. It's like this rarity, so there's like they have a whole song around it and a whole. So some people love it.
They have a song around
They have a song about it. So
that just makes me laugh. Look, I don't buy it. If you comment in the notes below, if you're a wintry, cold, sort of wet weather lover, like comment in this section. Maybe we'll send you a jacket. Maybe we won't. Just
Rick,
your comment. But
Rick, you know me. I love cold weather. I just don't like dreary because I'm a Rocky Mountain person, and we all know the Rocky Mountains. It's sunny 300 days out of the year. But I actually love the cold weather. I just don't like the dreariness of like what's behind you.
Yeah, it is pretty dreary. Brandon's a skier, for those of you that don't know. Brandon's a big skier. And I think I'm gonna say this, Brandon, I'm gonna say it probably it's gonna sound mean, but I mean it as a compliment. He's an amateur photographer, right?
Uh-huh.
If any of you follow him on Instagram or something like that, you would see he takes some beautiful pictures of places that he's been skiing and hiking and stuff like that. And he puts beautiful sort of I don't know if it's filters or whatever you're doing, but you take some really beautiful pictures. So it's
a little Photoshop. And it's funny, that reminds Rick's always bugging me for show me pictures of people. And I'm like, Rick, I only have scenery I only take pictures of scenery. Like, sorry, I don't have a picture of you.
I'm a people watcher. And I'm like, I like people. I like the images of people and stuff and busyness. Brandon goes to the mountains and just like solitude.
Yeah,
and I'm like,
it's my therapy.
That's not for
your
me.
head.
That's not for me. Bailey, what's going on today, Bailey? Episode 80. That's amazing. You've produced
80.
a whole bunch of them. I know you've produced a whole bunch of them now. That's pretty awesome. You're going to be part of this one too, a little bit more than you normally are at the midway or halfway. I'm pretty excited to have you come on and chat some more with us. But what do we got to kick things off?
Yeah, well, first I want to extend a big thank you to Matt for joining us for 5 episodes. We really appreciate you coming on here and talking with us. But this podcast is sponsored by Momentum, where we help businesses connect, collaborate, and engage using Microsoft Teams. And I will leave it to you guys.
Thanks, Bailey. All right. Episode 5. This is not 4.5. I've got a bum pinky, so it's actually 5, right? So it's 5. Look at that thing, that bum pinky. All right.
Is this show ADA compliant?
It is because I'm on it. It is.
I don't know if I was supposed to say that joke.
Great. You know what? Actually, Brandon, I think that was a great segue because as we round out this whole 5-episode transitioning to teams series with Matt and the fun park, one thing that is really important is compliance. And Matt, you've got some, call it tips and tricks or trials and tribulation, but compliance in several different ways, but specifically 911, that's a big deal.
It is. Yeah, it's something I lose sleep over because it's I know a lot of people. So most of the organizations I've been at, it's like, the sentiment has been, well, if you have an emergency, are you really going to open up your laptop and dial 911? Well, regardless of whether that may be the norm or not, you have to be prepared to be compliant in a situation where, not to be over dramatic, but it, could be life or death, right? I mean, it's a telephone system and you are expected to be able to dial 911 and get, proper expeditious help, for your scenario that you may be in, however unfortunate it may be. And so it's a big deal. And I think it's something that's not a lot talked about. I know people don't like to talk about these things because it's a little, dreary. Uh, uh.
Love it.
It's very important though, because I mean, nobody wants to be the one making case law precedents. So I think it's something that during those planning stages that we talked about early on, first episode, you really have to put a lot of time and effort. Make sure that you fully understand how 911 calls are routed. It's not super complex, but traditional telephony guys are going to know all about it. But if you've got people that you're upskilling and whatnot, it is a little bit different. It's not so much that static address that you may be used to when you had, say in a Avaya analog phone sitting on your desk that never really moved. You really got to, really plan carefully how you're going to initially create your LIS, which, your location information service that Teams uses in order to locate you whenever you place that call. So not only the initial deployment of that LIS is critical, but also the maintenance as well. So a large organization is going to have a lot of networking equipment and topology that eventually that stuff goes end of life or, life cycle refreshes. You've got to have a plan for how you're going to maintain that LIS and make sure it stays up to date. So as you're swapping out Wi-Fi access points, switches, etc., you've got to build that. Teams that may or may not have ever been involved in the telephony aspect now probably have to be. So your networking crew, they've got to know now when they swap out a switch or an access point, they've now got to submit some type of ticket or something, some event needs to be triggered that your LIS now needs to be updated for that appropriate MAC address or BSSID or subnet, whatever it may be. So I think that's really critical that I don't see a lot of people talking about, but it's something that, it's important and you got to make sure it's there.
So Matt, you said something that's interesting to me. And by the way, I just want to just as a quick plug for Brandon here. Brandon used to work at Entrado, and for those of you who don't know, Entrado is a massive 911 shop. So Brandon helped build some of the stuff there at Entrado. But interestingly enough, what you just said was a situation we've run into where a bank, as an example, I think they were a credit union actually, um, didn't have networking equipment in buildings that was consistent. So they didn't have a LAN that was consistent. They didn't have so devices that were I guess sectioned off appropriately in the NIS for recognition, right, by teams. And so that was a pretty interesting component because it stopped them from rolling out teams in a lot of different ways and to all the areas until they figured out their networking issues. So what you're just saying now makes a ton of sense, and no one actually talks about it, right, man? No one actually talks about this from a networking perspective. If you're swapping out gear, it is important that your organization understands that, at least your team's admin understands that, so that they can keep up the 911 policies and stuff like that. So anyway, great point, Brandon.
Yeah, and there's a lot of things to take into consideration, and I just to echo Matt, your comments is spend time around that design, spend time understanding it, and then the big tip that I would throw out there is, as you move through it, not just from a technical telecom IT perspective, but start creating a behavioral change in your end users feel empowered to test that service. We've come a long ways in the 911 world, where used to be you'd have to dial 911 and tell the dispatcher, hey, this is just a test call, just want to validate my address. And it's gotten to be now where it's all automated. You can now dial 933. There's no penalties around that. It'll automatically, spit out and read back your address. It'll tell you whether it's verified or not. It'll tell you whether it's going to route to the expected PSAP or if it's going to go to the national overflow call center. And I think that's one that doesn't get stressed enough is, from a technical perspective, yes, your telecom and your IT really need to understand the requirements and the compliance with it. But I think we now live in this, I'll call it dynamic world. You had, what was it, a couple years ago, January 1st, 2022 or whatever it was, where Ray Bomb compliance came out, where you needed to have dispatchable location. It needed to be dynamic. It needed to be on a per call basis in a nomadic fashion. And it's too hard for IT alone to keep track of where their users are sitting. Yeah, you can ensure your policies are set up and working, but in a dynamic world where I work from home one day and I'm in the office the next, it should become a habit of me, the end user. If I want to know my own safety is going to be handled, I should be empowered to use 933 to verify my own location data. So that's my tip: is enterprises should be putting into practice user training around validation as much as they should be focused on getting the policies right.
Yeah, and it's also, I mean, I think you hit the nail on the head there. It's that user education. Don't be scared of it, right? And also there's an aspect to it as well. So when you're remote, right, you turn on the remote location lookup in your emergency calling policy. So now users have the ability to update that address, and so you have to kind of approach it in a way that makes them feel comfortable with it, because now it's like, oh, well, you can see my address. Well, not really. It's truly meant, the purpose is that you get the help you need when you need it, where you need it. So there's some end user education where when you're working remote, like I am, like, pop open your Teams client. You may or may not, need or feel you need to make a 933 call, but look at the location on the bottom left below your dial pad. Make sure that's up to date, right? You leave home for lunch and you go work at Starbucks, check to see, make sure that it's right. I mean, again, most everybody has one of these guys right here. But it doesn't mean that, you can brush off the compliance aspect of, this is a full-fledged telephony system, and it's held by the standards and regulations that any other telephony system will be held to. So it's important to make sure that you're doing the appropriate actions to make sure whatever your organization feels is compliant, that's what you need to be doing. So
you're muted, Rick.
Sorry about that. 933, Matt. What's for those of you that don't know, Matt, what's 933?
So 933 is a way for you to simulate an emergency call in Microsoft Teams. It will behave exactly like an emergency call does. If you were to dial 911, it's going to pop up a big red border around your screen. It's going to, I think it's like a big red exclamation mark in the middle. And then right below it, I believe it will display your emergency address that your operating system believes that you're at based on either the LIS or your remote worker policy. And then when you dial in, you're going to hear a recorded voice that says, you've placed an emergency call, and this is the address that would be sent to a PSAP, so the dispatch center, if you were to actually dial 911.
Yeah, and it'll let you know whether it's verified. And then the other thing it'll do for you is it helps you know that your emergency notification policies are working.
Yes,
so like if you're wanting to bridge someone in, whether it's muted, unmuted, or you're wanting to send that Teams notification, it gives you a way to validate all of because that's also a requirement of the FCC. So it's a good way to ensure that your policies are also working. That's a common thing we see with our customer base is that's kind of the overlooked piece, is they forget the notification piece, especially on a per location basis. And all of a sudden they get a 911 call, and let's say it's someone in California making that call at the office in California, and the notification goes to someone in New York. And maybe that's intended. A lot of times we find out that wasn't intended. It needed to go to someone in California. So it's test is the thing I stress. Is 933 is an invaluable tool for your admins and your end users.
Yeah, and for the more business, stakeholder side, it's something that's probably going to cost a little bit of money internally, some labor, some maybe even some consulting. So I don't short on this one. This is one that you got to do it right. So if it costs a little bit of money to change your processes, to make sure you fully understand it. I mean, when I first started this, I knew 911. Just my gut told me, it's like, I need to really understand this from top to bottom. So I mean, I spent weeks like just diving into like all of the details, so I fully understood what exactly was happening, when a call was routed, where and how. And so I think having your team fully understand that process from top to bottom, and then understanding, okay, now that we understand the process, what do we need to do to make sure that we stay compliant with that? So again, it's a lot of work. If you're a large organization and you have a large U.S. presence, then you probably got a lot of buildings that you've got to set up. If you've got on-site security, you've got to make sure those calls are getting notified to the specific security desk that you want it to be. So yeah, it's a lot of planning, a lot of maintenance, and a lot of testing. So definitely don't shy away from it. It's achievable. We all do it, but it's a lot of work.
Mm-hmm.
Well, here's what I'd like to do for the rest of this episode, guys. This is Matt. You've had an amazing sort of run with us to pull through so many tips and tricks that you've learned over 3 massive migrations. And I'm going to ask that Bailey come on. We're a consolidated show today. We're a 30-minute show, right? Whereas we're headed into some additional holidays. So we're going to have Bailey come on and help us remember with some B-roll. You got some B-roll, Bailey? I'm just kidding, not B-roll. How cool would that be? Some B-roll. Just to help us kind of go through the first 4 episodes, kind of the biggest tips and tricks that Matt has worked on with us, so we can consolidate this one episode. If someone watched this one episode, they get the whole thing consolidated. Like, here are the best things about each of these shows, so that you can go off and plan your own big migration. So yeah, Bailey, why don't you lead that for us?
Absolutely. So I think the first episode, and first off, these guys talk nonstop. So I would just like to appreciate that I had this all organized.
So we appreciate it.
Oh, thanks. Yeah. So the first episode, I think I like to call it the pre-prep. So leading up to the discussion behind the decision to migrate to Teams Phone. We talked a little bit about executive sponsorship, upskilling, soft phone only deployments. You guys take it away.
I love that, by the way, the soft phone only deployments. Like, I don't think people understand that if you just did that, you're like 99% easier than if you sat there and went through all the other, let me just check with our experienced people to see if they really need a phone. Like, don't even check, guys. Don't check. Just send physical phones. I mean, just don't send physical phones out, period. It's a headset and a PC and you're done, right? Like, it's super simple. Anyway, sorry.
I think it's easy to gloss over that too, because that will be a big friction point. But having that executive sponsorship and really embracing that, I mean, look, we're doing this to save money. We're doing this to provide flexibility. Desk phones, in my opinion, some may feel differently, are inherently not bad. I mean, they're not super flexible. You can't take it with you everywhere you go. And sure, you can have a combination of both because it is, a nice cloud-based platform. But I think really embracing that is going to pay dividends in the long run. I mean, no more hardware, like end user hardware refresh cycles and all that good stuff. So soft phone all the way.
And I'll just chime in, and this is a shout out to Ollie, not Matt, that you know him, but we did a CIO Corner episode with a very large construction firm. We took them on a journey from on-prem to UCAS to Teams. And we did a similar thing where we talked with him about, from a CIO perspective, what did that look like? And one of the things he said was, I just got to a point where I didn't give the business a choice. We took the phones away.
Yeah.
He said, ultimately, and this was kind of funny, and again, shout out to Ali, giving him the credit here, is the response was, and he jokingly said, the biggest complaint was, hey, I can now see the dust on my desk where that phone sat. So I think it is really important to focus on that soft phone only, and where necessary, just pull the plug.
What's interesting about that, Brandon, is man, I can't remember. It's not DeWalt. It's like a big they're a construction company. It starts with a D. But what was interesting about that is that they're a construction company, right? They do like massive bridges and streets and freeways, stuff like that. And you wouldn't think that a construction company, who's call it as rough as it gets, let's just say, right? Construction would be like, we don't need physical phones, we're going to go all soft phone. But he didn't give him a choice, went to all soft phone and just crushed it with his transition.
Yeah.
So, okay, let's go episode 2. What was in episode 2 that was pretty awesome? I think that episode 1, upskilling the soft phone, there's a bunch in there that was just a gold. What's the next one, Bailey?
So we talked about episode 77, segment 2, was kind of the early stages of the migration. So it was planning the pilot phases, persona mapping, and the importance behind a proof of concept.
Yeah, super important. I mean, planning all the way. The more it's cliche to say, ounce of prevention is a pound of cure. I think it fits in here as well, because you plan, you test rigorously all of your scenarios. You're making sure that all your call flows are working the way that you're expecting. You're starting to roll out to a small group of friendly people, and you're really just honing in on, not only are you testing, but it's also giving those people that you are upskilling the opportunity to start learning. Oh, this is how this works. This is how that works. So there is some learning curve there, but you can do that along the way if you're following this method where, okay, we're not stopping just to give people, folks time to learn. We're still moving, right? But they're learning along the way. We're finding these scenarios where we maybe there's a particular scenario where your organization struggles with, and now you're identifying that early, and you have that opportunity to really start honing in on those skills that are needed for a bigger deployment.
Yeah.
Go ahead. Brandon.
I was gonna say just a couple thoughts there. I think it does nicely tie into that first episode, right? It allows that upskilling to occur in kind of a real world environment, but without the pressure of, hey, this is our entire corporate structure. And going back to the compliance piece, this is a great spot to tie into understanding what your compliance needs are around E911. And then lastly, I think it's a great spot for a business to start identifying. Matt, you'd mentioned it earlier. There may be a need to go out and find a partner to consult with. This is probably the time that you're going to start discovering that.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think that was a great episode, and I'm going to wrap that one in. Matt, you had the ounce of prevention. I've got one for you, and I'm going to cue this, or is it Terry Mozina? So when I used to work when I was a young kid, I was 19 or something like that, American Airlines. Terry Mozina was the manager, my manager, whatever it was. But pre-planning prevents poor performance. It's the 5 Ps.
There you go.
Pre-planning prevents poor performance. So there you go. Shout out to Terry Mozina there. All right. That was episode 2. What about episode 3?
So this one was the free tools episode. So if anyone comment below if you haven't gotten the, I think we gave away a free, what was it? The persona mapping guideline and a couple other free plans. So
some UAT plans.
Yeah. So great episode. Comment below if you need those. We also spoke just a bit about, I think this was the Greenfield legacy data talking point as well. We spoke about that. Big one. So the tools, huge for the tools, persona mapping, like all this stuff, because I'll tell you what was cool about that, Matt.
the transition from extensions, right, for some organizations is tough to wrap their head around, like this whole extension thing. So when you do the persona mapping, it helps clear the way a little bit, right? You do that persona mapping, and that's when people start to understand, oh, okay, we can do this without extensions and without those sorts of things. This is okay. I can see how this works now, and that tool really helps them accomplish those things. But the big one there, which was the shoot, I forgot what was the last one, Bailey? That was I think the last point.
Like
The Greenfield. That was it. That was it.
Retrofit, say a Cisco config into Teams, or do you just scrap it and go, we're doing a clean build?
On my cell phone, you know how many Google, sort of things I've like migrated, like this phone and that phone and this one. It's like a combination of like 4 or 5 phones. Like, and I don't use like any of the old stuff. Like any of the old stuff. Go ahead, Brandon. Go ahead.
Since you're bringing it up, side conversation, because I make fun of Rick for this because we travel quite a bit, and he runs an Android, I run an Android, and I've seen him. He'll be standing there. We'll go to get directions somewhere because we're in a city we're not familiar with, and I'll be like, Rick, grab us an Uber or something, and he'll open up his phone and he will scroll through like 8 pages of app icons to find his Uber app, and I'm like. And speaking of migration, he's bringing the cobweb of 18 phones into one, and so then I laugh out of I'm OCD. I open up my phone and I'm like, Rick, I start over every time. Look how clean my phone.
Yeah, I do too.
He's got like 3 little folders, boop, 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 and there's like nothing else on his phone.
There's nothing on it.
I have to search. So I don't even look at the apps anymore. Now I just go to the search bar, go Uber, and then there it is. Okay, great, because it's like, it's impossible to find.
2 minutes.
But that's it. Good. I mean, that's it though, right? You have a Cisco or an Avaya, and I guarantee you there's no one that has kept records as good as you possibly can. There's no one that's kept records for that long, that well. No one. I know you think you're
back here, right?
You're awesome, but you're not that awesome. Like, seriously, your organization is not that good at documentation. They're not.
I feel attacked.
I'm just saying, like, I apologize, but...
Yeah, you're 3,000 miles away from me, and I'm.
I think the big point for me for that episode was, we talked about the cost savings and the flexibility and the modernization and everything. But another big one is when you start doing those persona maps and you start identifying, like, hey, do these people really need a phone anymore? Because for me, I've spent almost just as much time deploying phones, Teams phones, as I have taking away all of their telephony presence altogether, because now we have Teams. I'm just going to look up Rick Garcia's name now in Teams, and I'm just going to call him directly. And if I'm somebody who barely does or doesn't do any external dialing at all, I've now eliminated, I mean, I'm serious, like I've seen a pattern across multiple large organizations now where about 30% of our telephony presence has been eliminated entirely. Because they're not external callers, they're not folks who need external dialing. And now with Teams, if they're only doing internal dialing, why do you need a phone? And in the past it was, hey, welcome to XYZ company. Here's your laptop and here's your desk phone, right? That was for decades just the standard for a lot of companies. And now you're starting to right size the environment in addition to modernizing it as well. So for me, even though it's not in the spirit of deploying more Teams phone, it's a huge benefit to the organizations that I've worked for is we're right sizing. Think about taking away 30% of your license fees and your PSTN charges and et cetera, because you're just not doing that internal extension dialing anymore. Now it's just open your app and search for someone's name.
I have something to say about that specifically, but because Brandon and I talked about this yesterday, but I want to just say, has anyone ever seen, is it Unnecessary Roughness? Is it Keanu Reeves, I think, is Unnecessary Roughness, right? And it's an older movie about football and all that good stuff. And there's a Wales kicker guy, and he's like, hey, Keanu Reeves, they're in a bar, and he's got to say something. So he tells the music guys, he's like, cut it, cut it, cut it. So now when Matt's saying, let's take away Teams phone, I'm like, cut it, cut it, cut it.
Yeah. No, we're saying take away their old phone and then just not give them anything else anymore if they assuming that they fit in that persona type, right? And you're doing your persona mappings and you're identifying, hey, these are knowledge workers that have no external presence. They don't, if they're communicating externally, it's either through Teams already, right? And hey, by the way, you can call people directly in Teams too, even externally, or email, and they had a phone because it was just always there. So,
Brandon, we literally talked about this yesterday morning.
I've got two things to say. One, first, your accent imitation for some reason reminded me of one Dr. Andrew Riley at a Kixie. Can't understand that guy when he talks. So Andrew or Stuart from a Kixie, if you're listening, yes, I did mean to pick on you.
Except you understood what I said.
I did understand. It's because you only said 2 words. So I said 3 times. So I'm like, okay, I understand that. So anyway, there's that. And then it made me think, because we're, as we wrap up this episode, which we're going to go past 30 minutes now, and the what's next, it made me think about what is next for teams. Matt, you were talking about, looking up Rick Garcia to call him. When is the day coming where that language model, the AI model, allows me to just say, hey, Copilot, I want to talk to Rick Garcia, and it pops up, how would you like to talk to him? And now I don't even have to go search for him. I've got that voice assistant in a business sense, right? We're all used to the voice assistants, I think, on our phones these days. I use mine all the time, by the way. I'm waiting for the day that Microsoft comes to market with that assistant, where now I can just say, hey, you know what? I have a question for Rick. Can you call Rick for me? And that call happens.
Yeah, I think it's coming.
Or whatever.
Yeah.
I do.
I mean, I think we saw some stuff at Ignite a couple weeks ago where they're starting to release Copilot agents that are more interactive in your meetings. So they're taking active notes for you, and you can actually start interacting with them more so than just through text. So I think it's coming. Yeah.
Yep.
So Bill Gates said a long time ago, and I was looking for the day. I was looking for when he actually had that quote, but he talked about literally getting rid of the phone number. And that is, I'm looking at an article from 2008, and it says Microsoft's grand plan to eliminate phone numbers. Like, that was in 2008. So we're 24. So now, like, I think we're getting to that. I think we're getting close to that, right? Because, I'm actually part of a panel in London next week. Or sorry, I was part of a panel last week. About collaboration sort of 3.0. And that's really, there was a component of that discussion where it really is do you need a number to access someone anymore? You really, with click to call, with QR codes, with all sorts of engagement agents. I'm going to call them agents, not bots. There's a lot to be said for where we're going in the next 5 years. I say 5, but the acceleration right now feels like it's more rapid than ever, right? So it's pretty interesting time though. So that was a great point for that episode. Was that episode 3 or 4, Bailey? I forget. That was 3, right?
3. Mm-hmm.
Excellent. This is all just amazing stuff, Matt. This is great. Brandon, anything else on episode 3?
No, just the phone number comment, and then we can move on. I think it's interesting that Bill Gates said that in 2008, because you think about, I was Googling while you were talking about this. WhatsApp came out in 2009, right? WhatsApp really started from a end user consumer perspective, personal level. Yeah, they tie it to a phone number, but that really started the whole movement of, hey, you don't really need a PSTN network. And then it looks like it was about 2011, Microsoft made that huge move to buy Skype, and Skype had already been out for a number of years. Skype was kind of that same idea as WhatsApp, like creating this collaboration platform that kind of eliminated the need for a phone number. So, and now fast forward 2024, obviously we're still using phone numbers, but I think we're light years closer to maybe not needing that phone number anymore.
What's interesting is this. Ready with this quote? Here's the quote. Right, not the quote, but right now the mobile phone, the desktop phone, the email that you have on your PC, or instant messaging, they're all very different things. And the issues about how much you inform your schedule, blah, 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 blah. Anyway, your current activity share. Anyway, it's like by bringing together all these kinds of communications, we can greatly simplify our experience. Like, that's 2008. Right. That's pretty interesting to think. Yeah, how far is it? 16 years ago? Is that right? 16 years ago now,
Yeah.
essentially. And now I think we're literally on the cusp of that now. So great point in episode 3. Episode 4, Bailey, what do we got?
Yeah, good stuff. So episode 4 was just kind of the why behind the move to Microsoft Teams, lessons learned, and some immediate benefits that you saw post migration.
Yeah, good stuff. It was obviously we talked about it last week. It was the immediate benefits were obvious. I mean, we could not only deploy right away, we're not sending field techs out to deploy physical handsets, right? But we could monitor in real time. We can make changes in real time if we had to. We can, troubleshoot and really just own the full process. And it's immediate. Everything's immediate. It's cloud-based, right? It's not dependent on on-prem infrastructure or having to go reboot a server or whatever the case is. Like all of those things, and I think it's hard to see unless you really sit back and think about it. It's like, what if I had this problem with an Avaya system, or what if I had this same problem with CUCM? What would I have had to do to really solve this? And it's only in retrospect that you start realizing, like, oh, I would have had to go do, 1 through 10, right? Whereas, okay, in Teams, I fire up PowerShell and I probably solve the problem in like 60 seconds potentially, right? Assuming it's not like some crazy routing thing, which would happen, with any system. But I think those are some of the immediate benefits and the same with the end users. We spin them up overnight, and the next day, boom, they've got their phone. Like it's done. Like that's it, right? So it's really good stuff.
I think Brandon, you also dropped a link in the last episode with some CQD Power BI templates.
And that goes a long ways to the that immediate value add to moving to Teams is you're not digging through a legacy system trying to understand where the data is at. It's all consolidated and then Microsoft has done a pretty good job of organizing that data, so it just helps you in a more real-time fashion isolate issues that might come up, or just generally see how you're performing across the services.
And remember to assign ownership to somebody on your team to own that dashboard. We talked about it. There's a ton of data there. It's all really good data, but you have to know what it's telling you and what the resulting action items are. Like, how do you follow up with this data if you see something wrong? So having somebody really own that report, and it's good for not just phone. You're getting meeting telemetry data out of that as well. So utilize that. Even if you're not on phone today, start looking at CQD, because you can see all of the your meeting and internal call, peer-to-peer call details. So really own that report, understand what it's telling you, and understand if you see something, what is that what action item does that translate to? So that's big.
I feel like Matt, we talked about like all these components here. I'm like, I feel like I need to write not an op-ed, but an open letter, not to Microsoft, but to like every business owner in the world, every business manager that has sort of direct responsibility for communications, and go, this is the best, in my opinion. I'd love to hear yours and Brandon's and Bailey's, but in my opinion, the best communication platform in the world. I'm not going to say phone system, because it's far more than a phone system. And I know there's competitors out there that are going, no, this is amazing. And there are a couple of other really, really nice platforms out there. But the information that the Teams platform brings together, and it has inherently from your business as an operating system, it just makes it so dang powerful. And I'm like, if you're not thinking about phones, even if I didn't sell it, like I'd go buy Teams phone if I was running a different sort of a business, I would buy a Teams phone just to take advantage of all the different ancillary services that roll in with Microsoft to make my company as productive as possible. So, like if you're thinking about a platform where you need to replace a Cisco or an Avaya, like I'm like, here's an open letter, like you like 100%. Like I don't care, don't come to us. You know what I mean? Go wherever you want, but go buy Teams for your organization because it is by far, I think, the best thing you can do as a tool to go increase that sort of customer experience, that employee experience, that everything experience. And anyway, I'm just I dig. I think it's pretty cool. Go.
But also come to us because this episode is sponsored by Momentum.
Yes, come to Momentum.
Batteries separately. No, I was gonna say like maybe it's worth taking maybe 5 minutes to talk about, as we tied it all together. Now, what's next for you, Matt? What's where do you see this team's evolution going for you? And my mind's already spinning around things that we see, whether it's around the buzzword Copilot, or it's around the new Q's app and maybe what doors that opens, and then ancillary services. Like where do you see your journey going?
Yeah, Copilot. I mean, everybody's talking about it, right? So, with now having the ability to use Copilot in your PSTN calls, I think huge. I'm really excited, and I don't know how much more innovation you can have for just your standard knowledge worker telephone. I mean, you've got the best, and again, in my opinion, one of the, if not the best phone system, and it's so much more than that, that you're offering to your folks. And you start, adding on services to that, texting and now Copilot, right? And so for me, I mean, this is probably the gold standard, right, for your standard knowledge worker phone. What I'm looking forward to is really starting to blur the line between call center and a standard user phone, because with Copilot and with the Q's app and some of these other features that are being developed by Microsoft, I think you're going to start seeing that line again, in my opinion, in a really good way, start to be blurred. Do we need to spin up a complex call center application? Because hey, look at all the stuff that we're doing over in Teams Phone, right? Like there's a lot of cool stuff. And I mean, look, we just got callback numbers in the GUI now, so it's not PowerShell. Like it's going to keep innovating, and they're going to keep blurring that line. Now, will they keep charging more and more for it? We'll see. But in my opinion, I mean, I think that's kind of where I'm looking for in the future. How can I start challenging the establishments of these complex on-prem call center solutions and applications that we've been deploying? How can I start challenging that? Because that's my next target now is, hey, I've given it out to all the people who just need a phone. Now let's start looking at how do we transition or start expanding our scope to include more, which ultimately, I mean, almost certainly will result in more cost savings for the organization. It's going to be more flexibility for the end users, and it's going to, if you start integrating Copilot now with that, I'm sure a lot of call center agents don't really like typing in recap notes right into their CRM. What if that's all done for you? And now you're spending more time on the phone interacting with people, assuming that's what you like to do. Now, you're taking your focus off of these mind-numbing skills, and then now you're doing what you really enjoy doing, or that ultimately you might be metriced on, right? Like you're graded on is how many calls or whatnot. And so I think that's kind of where I'm looking in the future is how do I start challenging those existing call center apps that we're starting to see more and more capabilities to compete with in Teams.
Matt, man, we talked about this, Brandon and I, last week. I mean, with obviously a couple weeks back, Microsoft launched 10 different agents. Okay, not bots. And I think that's what, not bots, but agents. And I think if you think about this, you really could challenge that whole contact center and not necessarily do a contact center, because if that agent can collect everything, if that agent can direct everything and solve complex problems and note take and do all those things, why would you need a separate platform or a more comprehensive platform to bolt on, as an example? Or even if you use the existing one, if you go Dynamics 365 or the Qs app, when you can go solve, call it 80% of those, with some automation, and maybe those people are now getting to be, kind of that supervisory role to make sure the customers are happy, or maybe they do the talking, but there's more automation built by those agents that collects that data, that inserts that data where it needs to go. Though that's an interesting concept, Matt. I think we're all four of us are probably on the same exact page, because I think that's where we're going to get. It's I saw some studies recently of the contact center business is gonna go up, and I was sitting there thinking in my head going, is it? Because like I see all these agents that we're creating that are really going to chew into that sort of tier one, semi tier two sort of environment in whatever your call center may be or your contact center may be. And I feel like we're going to be able to do a lot of that. So do you need that big platform anymore? So
yeah, if we get skill-based call routing and Teams phone, it's a wrap.
It's over. It's over.
There you go.
I guess I'd wrap up kind of this in my mind to say, and I've said this before, I think even on podcasts, I think we've finally hit the era where, the buzzword unified communications has been around for a long time, right? 2009, 10. I truly believe this is the real definition of unified communications, where we're starting to see it all come together. And like you said, Matt, now that the lines are going to start blurring with the omni-channel pieces, it just enhances that true unified communication collaboration experience to a level that we probably would have never imagined even 4 or 5 years ago.
Yeah,
Yeah,
definitely.
Well, Matt, this has been a super enlightening series. I think you've pulled in so much good information. Bailey's done a great job of organizing it all for us and summarizing it all for us. And it's really just been a pleasure to kind of have you walk through these different sort of experiences and scenarios and tools and tricks for everyone to figure out how they transition to Microsoft Teams. You've done it 3 times at large organizations, and so that's pretty cool to get your behind the scenes experience. Oftentimes, we have a lot of experience because we work through a lot of customers, right? But one of the things that's really great to sit down and talk to the customer and kind of get your feedback and go, are we on the right track? Is our thinking in line with the customers? Are the things that we're telling the customer to do the right things, that the right things for the customer, those sorts of things. And a lot of the stuff that you've gone through, we've probably thought about, and we probably think in our heads, but really don't kind of communicate it as well as you've done in putting it in bullets for us. So I think this has been a really enlightening series. So I want to thank you for your time, Brandon.
Yeah, this has been all I've been thinking about, and cue the cheesy inspirational music. It has been a great journey, and we're coming to an end, and I'm like, man, 5 episodes doesn't seem like a lot, but when you spread it out over 5 weeks, and we spend time maybe talking on the side, exchanging emails, Matt, you've almost become like this fixture in our podcast. And as we wrap it up, I'm thinking, man, which one of us is going to have the hole in the heart come next week's episode, when it's like Rick and I now have to go find a guest, and it's not you. Well, maybe it is you. Maybe we come back and say, you know what, Matt, sorry, we're missing you too much. You got to come back.
Yeah. I was thinking we'll send him a golden mic, as what's Howard Schultz, at Microsoft, not Microsoft, Howard Schultz at Starbucks. He's like some chairman, emeritus. Like, I'm always going to be around, guys. I'm always here for you. What do you need? So Matt's going to be our co-host emeritus or something like that. So he can always be around and hang out with us.
Yeah, and I think it was episode 1. I said that, or maybe it was in the green room that I said, Matt might have to become our, like the news channels have their analysts for specific topics. So maybe Matt becomes our, hey, we need John to hop on for 10 minutes and give us your analyst perspective and then pop back off. And we've had that happen in the past, right? Where you shouted out, I think it was it Jimmy Vaughn who, like, 10th caller, he ended up jumping on. We're like,
he did.
Shoot.
And we added him on. He's like, hey guys, how's it going? We brought him on. It was awesome. Yep. That's right. 10th caller.
So Matt, you might become that person. Anyway, long way of me saying we really appreciate it. I think.
Thank you. It's been a blast being on here. So
yeah, the knowledge, experience, and tips and tricks you bring is invaluable to any listener. So we appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you.
And I've got one correction for you, Brandon. One correction to what you said earlier. Now, Bailey has to go find us a guest.
Yeah, I was going to say that. I was thinking it. I wasn't going to say it.
Hey, I don't want to sound I don't want to sound bossy. That's all.
Just so you know, I love it. All right, well, that's a wrap here. Episode 80, great consolidation of the last 5 shows. It has been a blast. Thanks, Matt, for your time. We certainly appreciate it. But for those of you that are interested in migrating to Microsoft Teams Phone, the series was great to watch. Or if you really need it consolidated, watch this episode 80 so that you can kind of get the best of the last 5 episodes. Again, Matt has migrated 3 large organizations. He's on his 3rd very large organization to migrate to Teams Phone. And his experience is invaluable for you. So check us out, episodes 76 through 80. Or is it 76 through 80? 76 through 80?
Yeah, 76 through 80.
76 through 80 with Matt Carlson. Matt, thank you very much. Brandon, you want to send us out? Bailey, thank you so much.
I was going to say, hit the button, Bailey. And Rick, boom.
Come on, Bailey.